Good morning. Man, our worship was great today. Can we thank our worship leaders? Oh man, that was great. That last song to me is Anointed, right out of the book of Revelation. I mean, what a great thing for us to say that Jesus is worthy. And we believe he changes people's lives, and that's why we're here today. And that's what everything we do is about here today. So one more thanks to our worship team. Y'all thank them. Well, we're starting this series today, and I was thinking about defining moments, and I couldn't help but remember, I'll never forget this night. We were home, Mark and I were home in Atlanta for Thanksgiving. We were out that night with my one brother and my four sisters and everybody's spouses, and we had just come home from the comedy club, and I felt terrible. And I had only felt that way one other time before, and he was, that one time before was with his grandparents and not walking yet. So I kind of whispered to Mark, honey, I think I'm pregnant. He said, what? That's impossible. You can't be pregnant. I said, well, honey, I've only felt this way one time before. I think I am. Well, we were passing a CVS at the time, and we pulled over, and we went in, and we brought to the counter 2 pregnancy tests in case one was wrong, and then a thing of Tums. Can you imagine what that guy must have been thinking, right? And, of course, you've met Anna, right? That was Anna. That was a defining moment for us, and you have your own defining moments. Life is kind of measured in moments, and some of the moments that we have, we never forget because we know they're game changers, and we know that our life will never be the same. That those moments are literally going to define our life. Moments like when you chose your college, or when you met your best friend, or when you found your spouse, or when you had your kids, or when you got a diagnosis, or when you lost your last parent, or when you got that dream job. There are also all kinds of historical defining moments, and we can't really imagine human history without them. We can't imagine Neil Armstrong not taking that first step. We can't imagine Michael Jordan not trying out again after he didn't make his high school basketball team. We can't imagine the tank man who stood before with courage in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. We can't imagine Abraham Lincoln not writing the Gettysburg Address. Every one of those defining moments and many more made waves in human history. Well, over the next couple of weeks, I want to talk about defining moments that make waves in God's story. Moments that have eternal significance. And these are moments that Mark kind of already talked about this. These are moments when God's faithfulness and your trust result in God's amazing outcomes. These kind of defining moments literally are all throughout this book. And we can't imagine God's story without these defining moments in them. What if David had never thrown the stone? What if Daniel had bent down and worshiped the king? What if Esther had been afraid to go into the king's room? And of course, there are many, many more here. But here's what really is powerful. God is not finished writing these kinds of stories. Over the next few weeks, as we talk about these defining moments, I want you to think about your defining moments, and I want us to think about our defining moments. See, every believer has opportunities in their life. It's a moment. And in that moment, you have a chance, and you can make a choice to radically trust the Lord. You can make that chance, you can take that risk to take a leap of faith and follow Jesus and live out God's very best plan in your life. See, every one of you will have defining moments in your life. Now, take a minute and look to the person to your left. And now look to the person to your right. Now, I'm pretty sure that unless it's your spouse and you share a defining moment, all the defining moments in the room are going to look a lot different. But all the defining moments have one thing in common, and that is risk. Risk is the common denominator. Now, that risk could come with a friendship in your life. It could come with your marriage. It could come with your money or your career. And what God asks of you may be very risky and very, very scary. I mean, what if I lose my friend over this? What if this totally wrecks my career? Defining moments are these grand opportunities where we get to trust and where we get to jump into God's bigger plan. Are you thinking about yours? You know, online, we've created a hashtag GCB, defining moments. Put it on your social media. I'd love to hear them. Or you can just email us at definingmoments@gracecb.org. Some of you have already done that. But send me your defining moments. I want to hear, and you'll help me prepare for the messages over the next weeks if you'll let me into your life and let me see the kind of defining moments that you're having. You know, we also have had a lot of defining moments as a church. We took this giant risk and a huge leap of faith when we left our former campus with only the money we had raised over 3 weeks at the end of 2017. We left millions of dollars of endowments. We left a 100,000 square foot church campus because we believed that God was leading us to do that. And we're going to have another opportunity to take a giant leap and a risk later this fall, where we're going to be together raising the resources necessary to put down permanent roots in one of the fastest growing parts of the Lehigh Valley. What a strategic piece of land God has led us to carry out the mission that He's calling us to invite all people to find this Jesus that we just sang about. But here's the truth. Where there is no risk, there is no faith. You don't need to trust God if it's easy. You don't need to trust God when the vision is really small. You don't need to trust God when the consequences aren't that big a deal. But when you risk, when you trust, that, my friends, is a defining moment. Defining moments invite you to trust God more than you ever have in your life. And that brings us to perhaps one of the most told and most loved, but also really one of the most misunderstood stories in the Bible. You know it. David and who? Goliath. You know, this story is so much more than a giant that gets taken down by an underdog. Here's how David's defining moment begins to unfold. King Saul and his armies are at a standstill. I mean, think Braveheart. Remember that? The Israelites' army is camped on one side of the valley, and they're lined up facing the Philistines, their arch enemy, on the other side of the valley. And this standoff had literally lasted for days. You could cut the tension with a knife. And here's why. 2 times a day for 40 days in a row, Goliath had made his way to the front of the Philistine battlefront, and he had mocked the Israelites. He had screamed insults. He had defied their army and told them that their God was fake news. And here's what he wanted. He wanted one man to take him on. And that man-to-man battle would settle the score between the two nations. There would be one winner and one loser. There would be one master and one slave. But here was the problem. Every Israelite was afraid of Goliath. He was big, but he also had the most advanced military equipment. He had this incredible bronze helmet on. He had 5,000 shekels worth of armor. And he had an iron-tapered spear that weighed as much as most of the soldiers out on the battlefield, and Goliath was able to twirl it like it was a baton. No one was willing to take him on. Not Saul, not David's brothers, no one. Until David showed up and he stepped up. Here's what 1 Samuel 17 says. David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of Goliath. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear, and that they took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." And David said, "The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." This is a defining moment. David steps in to fight a giant that no one else will face. I mean, there were hundreds of older, more experienced people who had watched this 9-foot-tall giant and probably thought to themselves, yes, he's defying and insulting my God, and I wish someone would do something about it, but they had done nothing about it. But for David, it was his moment. So what does David do? In the defining moment, he trusts God. You know, the very first thing, the foundation of any defining moment that has eternal significance is you trusting God. You know, the Philistines and the Israelites were on that field faced off for weeks, but no one had dared move. But there David was, a young shepherd just ready to jump into the battle. David walked into the valley ready to face Goliath. See, there was a difference between David and everybody else. David's mind was on God, but everyone else had their mind and their eyes on Goliath. David was God-dominated, but everyone else was Goliath-dominated. In that defining moment, David was not paralyzed. He wasn't even, really, it says, afraid. He had what he needed to take a step. He had what he needed to not listen to his fear or the other voices. Everyone on that field was thinking about Goliath, but David was thinking about God. See, David had had all kinds of experiences in his life where he had seen God be faithful. And he knows that God is real, and he knows that God is present with him. Eugene Peterson says this, talking about this scripture. Just got to say, we are so blessed to have little ones in our church. No, I mean that. I mean that. There are a lot of churches, right? Okay, yeah. There are a lot of churches that don't have any kids, and praise God, we have a lot of kids, and we need to keep telling the next generation about Jesus. So, and thank God for parents who are willing to bring their kids. Let's thank them too. Right, all right. All right, back to this. Eugene Peterson says this. He says, reality is made up mostly of what we can't see. See, David sees Goliath, but he turns to God. He puts his focus on God. He sees the situation rightly. He gets reality because he knows God is powerful and God is in control. Now, Saul's still looking at Goliath, and he knows what a challenge this young shepherd boy is about to face. So he jumps in. He wants to help. And here's what he does. Here's his solution. Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, I can't walk with these, for I'm not used to them. So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag. In the pouch, his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David with his shield bearer in front of him. We got a standoff. Now, it's kind of ridiculous, at least in our mind, as we look at this picture, to think that Saul's armor would have helped David. Now, it really wasn't going to work. It would be like a Lehigh wrestler going onto the field to play a football game with J.J. Watt's football pads. I mean, let that image sink in for a minute. See, Saul's armor would work for Saul, but Saul's armor wasn't going to work for David. So David took off the armor and went into the water and got 5 stones to get him ready. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I wonder, how can a little tiny stone take down a very big giant? Well, was it good aim? Was it supernatural help? There's a book written by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about this in his book, David and Goliath. And he says that slingers were actually a type of warrior in ancient times, just like the cavalry and the infantry. And slingers used not little itty-bitty stones, they used tennis ball-sized stones. Now, we just read a minute ago, the Bible says 5, doesn't say small stones. What does it say? It says 5 smooth stones. So David had his sling, and he had perfected this sling by practicing. He had used it on the field, protecting his sheep. The sling was a proven weapon back then, and it was not Saul's weapon of choice, and it wasn't Goliath's weapon of choice, but it was David's. So David faced the giant as himself. Now, in the defining moment, this is such a good lesson to learn from David. Be you. Follow David's lead. Don't try to be something you're not. See, God made you exactly the way you are, and in your defining moment, there may be a lot of well-meaning people who try to put things on your shoulder, and they may not be bad things, but they may be really good things, but they may not be the right things for you. They may mask the way that God made you. I love that David knows what his gifts are, and he knows what his abilities are, and he knows that God gave him those things. And one of his abilities is that he can use a sling and a stone with accuracy. So it may not be a big sword, but it's David's, and it's his sling, and it's what he's good at. That day, Saul gave David a lot of advice and his armor, and a lot of other people probably gave David advice and a lot of doubts. And at first, David listened. I mean, he tried that armor on. He thought it could help, maybe, but it didn't. It paralyzed him. So David, in his wisdom, walked away from that, the armor and the advice. And when he got his eyes back on God's power, it changed the playing field. He dropped the armor and he picked up the stones. See, David knew who he was, and he knew whose he was. As he walks to face the giant, he has everything he needs. He has his sling, and he has his rock, 5 of them, and he has his God. But would he do it? And here's the next step in the defining moment. In your defining moment, don't duck. Don't do it. See, David in that moment, he could have decided to run away. He could have decided to go back to his father and his sheep. But David knew God was with him. And God was giving him the courage to step up and not duck. He had everything he needed. And his courage didn't come from the rock or the sling. It came from his God. God had been faithful, and God would be faithful again. Here's what happens. Goliath said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, but the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." When the Philistines drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. You know, David knew that the over-under wasn't very good for him as he walked out of that field. It wasn't good from a human perspective. But David knew something that Goliath didn't know. David knew something that his brothers didn't know. David knew something that even the king Saul didn't know. John Ortberg says it this way. He says, "One smooth stone and the power of God are greater than anything this world can throw against you." Hey, say that with me. That's a great quote. One smooth stone and the power of God are greater than anything this world can throw against you. Hey, don't miss that. You have the power of God at work in you if you are his. You can face the giant. You can step into any defining moment. See, David could do that. He could do that because he knew God was with him. David faced his moment looking to God for his help because he knew God was going to win, and he knew God would get the glory for the win. For David, Goliath was really just a means to an end to bring God's glory and to lift up his name. David's win would accomplish what God wanted. You know, it was ridiculous for everybody standing there to think that this shepherd boy was going to win, but that was the beauty of it. See, no one thought it would happen, and because it did happen, who got the glory? Are you with me? Who got the glory? God. God got the glory, and everyone would know it. In the defining moment, it's so important. This is so important. Whether it's you or me, whether it's our church, in defining moments, God gets the glory, not us. Not us. You know, there were so many little moments that could have undone David's defining moment. I mean, what if David had listened to his brothers who told him, "You're not good enough"? What if David had listened to Saul and said, "Hey, your resume is a little lacking and you don't have the right equipment"? What if David had listened to Goliath, who said, "You are not strong enough"? None of that happened because David was ready. In his defining moment, David was ready because God had been preparing him for that moment his entire life. And hear this, it's the same with you. God is right now preparing you for defining moments that are to come. David had had so many experiences. He told Saul about some of them. He had fought lions and he had fought bears. He had been about the business of protecting his sheep. And every time, God had protected him. God was giving him the strength and the heart to get him ready, not just for lions and bears, but for the giant. Now, I don't know when your moment is coming. I don't know if you're facing it today. I don't know all the defining moments that are going to happen in the life of our church, but the time to get ready is now. See, God's preparing you, and in God's economy, nothing, hear this, nothing is wasted. Your failures aren't wasted. When you blow it, it's not wasted. When you trust God in something little, it's not wasted. Every time you encourage someone else to trust or guide someone else towards believing in God's faithfulness, it's not wasted. Every time you see God be faithful, it's not wasted. Every time you pray and invite God to be faithful, it's not wasted. Every time you read this book, it's not wasted. See, God wants to show you that he's with you. He wants to show you that you can trust him. And he wants you to have a lot of small wins in your life so you're ready when the biggest challenges of your life come. And that brings us to the ultimate defining moment. You know, years after Goliath hit the ground, there was another who came. The son of David, Jesus, came into the world, and Jesus gave his life for you and for me. And that ultimate defining moment, if you follow him, shapes every other defining moment you will ever have. See, Jesus came into the world to be the real hero. If you see this story and you're trying to put yourself in the place of hero, you're going to end up blowing it, and you're going to end up missing out on what God really wants for you. Because friends, you know this, there are times when the giant keeps getting up off the ground. There are times when he ducks those rocks that you're throwing. But if you understand how Jesus came, if you understand that he came into your sin and he came into your brokenness and he came to give you everything you need for every defining moment. He came so that you would have what you need in the scariest defining moments of your life, including the moment when you leave this earth and go to heaven to be with him. See, he already won that one for you if you put your trust in him. Jesus came into the world to show his faithfulness and to invite our trust so that amazing things can happen. Friends, let's be people who step into our defining moments. Let's pray. God, you know every single defining moment that all of us in this room have had. And you know the ones that we haven't faced yet. And so, Father, by your grace, would you get us ready? Would you help us trust you and know who we are and know whose we are? I pray for any in the room who've not put their trust in Jesus yet, God. Maybe they're facing a defining moment, and this is the moment that they're going to say yes to Jesus being a part of their life. We pray that your spirit would move in people's lives in this room. And God, as we take this communion where we remember the defining moment that happened 2,000 years ago, that you gave your life for us, we know, God, that changed our life forever, and we are so grateful. Use us taking this meal to deepen our trust in you. Use it to help us take risks so that men and women and boys and girls through our life and through this church would meet Jesus, the only one who's worthy. And we pray it all in his name. Amen.